Imagine, like, raising $2 million to build a medical clinic overseas. You do exactly what you promised, right? You provide the supplies, you save actual lives, and then...
When the other shoe drops.
Exactly. You wake up one morning to discover your charity's entire executive board is facing criminal exposure in a foreign country, all because of one single missing compliance form.
Well, it completely shatters that classic comforting narrative we all hold about philanthropy. I mean, we really want to believe that human compassion naturally overcomes, administrative obstacles.
Yeah, love conquers all, right?
Right. But the reality of modern charity work is that compassion is heavily policed. Good intentions do not offer you any legal immunity whatsoever.
And that is the violent contrast we're exploring today. The absolute second charities work crosses a border, and we're not even talking about an ocean yet. I mean, just crossing a provincial line, you are walking out of this manageable, safe garden and directly into an unmarked legal jungle.
And the sheer scale of these legal hurdles, it catches even really seasoned nonprofit executives totally off guard. Because if your charity operates exclusively within a single province's tidy borders, you have a relatively predictable environment.
Right.
But the moment you look outward, the whole operational landscape fundamentally changes.
So let's ground this in a realistic scenario for everyone listening. Say you run a mid-sized Canadian environmental charity. Let's call it, I don't know, the Clearwater Initiative, based in Toronto.
Okay, good example.
You're doing great work, and someone in Vancouver calls you up and says, hey, we love what you do. We want to open a BC chapter. The natural instinct is just to say, amazing, here's our logo, go raise some money.
Which is the first massive trap. Because from the outside, the public just sees one unified brand, right? Like the YMCA or Big Brothers Big Sisters or the United Way.
Yeah, you just assume it's one big company.
Exactly. But internally, those are very often separately incorporated legal entities operating under what we call a federated structure. So if our Toronto Clearwater Initiative just hands over the logo to a group in Vancouver without a comprehensive trademark license agreement and a chapter affiliation contract, they've essentially surrendered control of their absolute most valuable asset.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because what is the actual risk there? If they're just raising money for the exact same cause, why spend thousands on lawyers to draft an affiliation contract? You're all on the same team,
Well, because what happens when they aren't on the same team anymore? What if that Vancouver chapter decides to partner with a corporate sponsor whose environmental record completely violates your core mission?
Oh, yikes. Yeah, that would be a nightmare.
It happens. And without a formalized contractual hook, the national office has zero legal footing to step in and stop them. So you aren't just watching your reputation drive off in a direction you hate, you're actually legally tethered to the damage.
So it's like, without a contract, you're essentially letting an acquaintance borrow your car, but you forget to set rules on where they can drive it, or I don't know what bumper stickers they can put on it.
It's actually worse than that. You aren't just watching them drive off. If that local chapter crashes the car, the national office is very often the one being sued for the damages.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's the real danger of unregistered trademarks and loose affiliations. A properly drafted trademark license agreement dictates the operational behavior of the chapter because, you have to protect the brand's integrity to protect the mission.
Okay, so you hire the lawyers, you lock down the trademark contracts across English-speaking Canada. Your federated structure secure, you're breathing easy. But then the Clearwater Initiative decides they want to expand into Montreal. Now you are crossing into an entirely different legal and linguistic framework.
Ah, the Quebec question.
Yeah.
This is where so many English-Canadian charities just severely underestimate their legal obligations under the Act respecting French, which is, the official and common language of Quebec.
Let me guess the standard Toronto charity response here.
Yeah.
They just say, oh, we'll just add a Francais toggle to the top right of our website, translate the donor brochure, and we're good to go.
Yeah, and that bilingual assumption is a massive legal liability, especially after the recent amendments under Bill 96.
Really? Just the website isn't enough?
Not even close. The law goes far beyond translating your public-facing stuff. It reaches deep into the actual operational reality of the organization. If you hire employees in Quebec, they had a fundamental legal right to work in French.
Wait, meaning like the internal software they use, the Slack channels?
Yes, absolutely. Your employment contracts, your internal employee communications, the training manuals.
You're kidding.
No, I mean it. Even the SaaS platforms your team uses every single day to track donations or or manage projects. If that software interface doesn't have a fully functional French version, you are out of compliance.
That is wild.
And the Office québécois de langue française, they actively enforce this. They will investigate the internal systems of organizations operating in the province.
So that just fundamentally changes the entire cost of doing business. You aren't just paying for a freelance translator anymore. You might actually have to migrate your entire organization to a completely different database software, just because your current one only operates in English.
Precisely. Which is why treating expansion as this, casual goodwill exercise is so incredibly dangerous. A single province's language laws can dictate how you architect your entire internal IT infrastructure.
Okay, which brings us to the next massive hurdle. Because if moving just one province over is to rewrite your internal operations, imagine extending a hand across an actual ocean. Let's say our hypothetical Clearwater Initiative wants to fund a massive reforestation project in Brazil. Can't we just, wire the funds to a trusted Brazilian NGO and let them do the work?
You would certainly think so, but the Canada Revenue Agency looks right through those kinds of arrangements. When a Canadian registered charity operates outside the country, the CRA traditionally enforces this strict requirement known as direction and control.
Direction and control.
Yeah. The governing document there is CRA Guidance CG002.
See, I always pictured international charity as these warm letter arrangements.
Yeah.
Like you send $100,000 to an NGO in Brazil with a nice letter saying, please use this to plant trees. We trust you.
Right, and the CRA views that as essentially laundering tax-exempt Canadian dollars. Under the direction and control model, you absolutely cannot just hand over money to a foreign entity and hope for the best.
Even if they're a legitimate charity over there.
Even then, the CRA expects a rigorous paper trail that proves the Canadian charity is the one actively calling the shots.
What does that actually mean practically?
It means segregated banking arrangements, continuous written agreements, ongoing monitoring, and incredibly detailed periodic reporting from the field.
But, how does a mid-sized charity sitting in an office in Toronto realistically control the daily operations of a tree-planting crew in the Amazon rainforest? That just sounds like an administrative nightmare.
It is an administrative heavy lift, and honestly, that's exactly why the Income Tax Act was amended back in 2022 to introduce a second pathway. It's called qualifying disbursements to non-qualified dunnies.
Wow, a very catchy poetic name from the government there. Rolls right off the tongue.
But, well, it translates to a slightly more flexible reality. Under this new pathway, a Canadian charity can actually make grants to a foreign organization without having to micromanage every single daily activity.
Okay, that sounds better.
It is, but the trade-off is that you must conduct an incredibly rigorous risk assessment before you send a single dollar.
So what does a rigorous risk assessment actually look like on the ground? Are we talking background checks?
Sort of. It means you're evaluating the foreign partner's governance structure, their financial history, the political stability of the region they're in, and their actual capacity to deliver on the project.
Right. And you still have to maintain robust documentation to prove those funds were used exclusively for charitable purposes. But the crucial point for you to understand here is that you have to deliberately choose between these two legal pathways. Direction and control or the qualifying disbursements.
Exactly. You have to pick one. You cannot just accidentally drift between them depending on the day.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me because this explains so much about how massive global charities actually operate. Like you look at titans like Amnesty International or Médecins Sans Frontières, and they don't use a tangled web of bilateral agreements. They use these massive international umbrella organizations to manage the scale, right? It's almost like a corporate franchise.
They absolutely have to. I mean, trying to manage 50 separate national entities all sending money and resources back and forth under 50 different tax laws, it would just collapse under its own weight.
Yeah, you'd spend all your money on accountants.
Right. So they create an international umbrella to hold the intellectual property and centralize all that compliance. But even then, the flow of those trademarks and resources across borders, it has to reflect the actual operational reality.
So you can't just fake it on paper.
No, you cannot just draft a contract that says, we are all one big happy family. The CRA auditor is going to come in and demand to see the actual money and the actual reporting moving exactly as that contract dictates.
Okay, so to satisfy the CRA, our little Clearwater Initiative is now gathering mountains of documentation, periodic reports, risk assessments from our partners in Brazil, Europe, all over the place. But The moment you start hoarding all that rigorous documentation on your foreign partners, you've just triggered a completely different legal trap.
Oh, definitely.
You are now trafficking in this invisible, highly regulated asset.
Personal data. And personal information has no passport.
Think of personal data, almost like radioactive material. It's incredibly powerful, but it is highly regulated and dangerous to mishandle. Or actually, think of it like a spider web.
The spider web.
Yeah, like the moment a European donor gives you their email address or a foreign partner submits the names of their local staff on a risk assessment form, boom, they attach a silk thread from Brussels or Berlin directly to your server in Toronto.
I like that.
Right. And if you move or alter or expose that data, regulators on the exact opposite side of the planet can just pull that thread.
That is an incredibly accurate way to visualize it, because we are used to PIPEDR, Canada's federal privacy law, which is largely based on consent. But the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, out of the European Union, that flips the script entirely.
Because it's extraterritorial.
Exactly. It doesn't matter where your charity is physically located. It only matters whose data you are holding.
So if our Canadian environmental charity solicits donations from a European supporter or, say, a university alumni foundation, just happens to have a database of former students who moved to France, they are squarely within Brussels' jurisdiction.
Without ever opening an office in Europe. And if you think you can just ignore it because, oh, we're just a nonprofit, you're wrong. The penalties are designed to forcefully compel compliance.
What are we talking? Slap on the wrist? A few $1,000s.
Try a maximum fine of 4% of global turnover or 20 million euros, whichever is greater.
20 million euros. That would vaporize most charities instantly.
Instantly, which means deciding where to host your charity's data is no longer just a routine IT decision. It is a major legal risk assessment. If you send donor data to a cloud server hosted in a country with weak privacy protections, you are completely accountable for that exposure.
And just to make that spiderweb even more complex, we have to talk about the AI question. Because this is wild. A local charity using an off-the-shelf AI tool like a chatbot or something is suddenly subject to the exact same international tech laws as a Silicon Valley giant.
Yes. The EU's Artificial Intelligence Act follows the exact same extraterritorial logic as the GDPR. And it's phasing into force right now, basically between 2024 and 2027.
Okay, so let's apply this back to our Clearwater initiative. Let's say we receive thousands of grant applications from international grassroots groups. Our small Toronto team is totally overwhelmed, so we use an AI-powered tool to scan the applications and triage the ones that best fit our criteria. Just to save time,
Well, the AI Act categorizes AI systems at risk, and an AI tool used to assess or score human applicants, that could very easily fall into a high-risk category.
It's just sorting applications.
Yes, the law dictates strict documentation, transparency, and human oversight obligations for high-risk AI. If you are processing applications from EU citizens, or even if the outputs of your system affect EU citizens, you are caught right in that net.
So AI is not just some cool efficiency hack you can hand over to an eager volunteer or the IT department.
Far from it. AI is now a fundamental compliance issue at the board level. And importantly, this isn't just some European quirk. We are seeing critical developments locally, too. Like Ontario is evolving its own frameworks around automated decision-making. The charity that ignores how their software processes data today is going to be playing a very, very expensive game of catch-up tomorrow.
It is just staggering to think that trying to process grant applications faster can turn you into a target for a European tech regulator. But what if the risk isn't about the data you hold, but the company you keep? Because international partnerships can trigger something even more severe. Something that sounds like it belongs in, I don't know, a geopolitical spy thriller.
Being legally classified as a foreign agent.
Yeah. We are stepping into the political crossfire now. Charities operating in or even just interacting with partners in the United States, they need to familiarize themselves with the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA. Now, I always thought VERA was for lobbyists, or like people working for foreign intelligence services. If our Canadian charity is just running a public education campaign in the U.S. about the importance of the Amazon rainforest, surely we don't fall under a law designed for foreign agents.
You would be surprised. Enforcement of SARACR has intensified significantly since 2017, and the Department of Justice applies an incredibly broad interpretation of it.
How broad?
Well, if your Canadian charity engages in activities in the U.S. on behalf of a foreign principal, and that can include foreign NGOs or international coalitions, not just governments, and Those activities involve political objectives, public relations, or what the law calls information dissemination. You can absolutely trigger registration obligations.
Information dissemination. So literally just educating the public could force us to register as foreign agents in the U.S.
If it is intended to influence the U.S. public or government regarding policy, yes. And the penalties for getting this wrong aren't just administrative fines. They actually include criminal exposure for the individuals involved.
Okay, but at least that's the U.S., and they're notoriously strict about this stuff. What about here at home?
Well, Canada actually just introduced its own severe mechanism.
Oh, great.
Yeah, the Foreign Influence Transparency and Accountability Act, which was passed as part of Bill C-70 in 2024, and it is catching the nonprofit sector completely off guard.
Okay, let's test our scenario again. The Clearwater Initiative joins an international climate coalition based in Geneva. That coalition receives funding from, let's say, a few European governments, and then the coalition asks our Toronto team to help lobby the Canadian government for stronger environmental policies. What happens?
A legal ticking clock immediately starts running. Under Bill C-70, if your organization enters into an arrangement with a foreign principal to carry out activities related to a political or governmental process in Canada, you have exactly 14 days to provide the details to the Foreign Influence Transparency Commissioner.
Wait, 14 days. Most nonprofit boards only meet once a quarter. 14 days is the blink of an eye.
Exactly. 14 days passes really quickly when you didn't even know the clock had started. And you have to look closely at the definitions in the bill. A foreign principal isn't just a foreign government. It includes foreign political organizations and entities controlled by them.
Right.
And a governmental process includes something as routine as developing public policy or just communicating with public office holders.
So if you are a charity doing international advocacy, or you're in a coalition with an international NGO that happens to get foreign government funding somewhere up the chain, you might actually be acting as a foreign influence proxy under Canadian law without even realizing it.
That is the reality we're living in now. The era of operating internationally on just goodwill and a well-meaning memorandum of understanding is definitively behind us.
Wow.
Every single time you communicate, advocate, or transfer resources, you have to assess which jurisdiction's laws you are triggering.
You can no longer just be a humanitarian, basically. The human being running the charity today has to simultaneously be a data privacy officer, a foreign diplomat, a tech auditor, and an international tax expert all at once.
Which is exactly why the most critical asset a charity can have today isn't just a passionate donor base, it's a robust compliance calendar.
Compliance calendar.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this goes far beyond just filing your annual taxes. A modern compliance posture captures your CRA international filings, the provincial language and registration requirements, GDPR records of processing, AI Act risk assessments, and these FARA and Bill C-70 foreign influence reviews.
You literally have to audit where your data flows, you have to understand your AI exposure, and you need to know exactly when foreign legislation is reaching right into your boardroom. And honestly, if listening to this list makes you incredibly uncomfortable, that discomfort is a necessary survival tool.
It really is.
It is so much better to feel that panic right now, mapping this out with your legal counsel, than to feel it during a CRA audit or a European regulatory investigation or, God forbid, when a foreign government threatens your staff with criminal charges.
Preparation is what allows the mission to survive. Discomfort drives that preparation.
Which leaves us with a deeply philosophical question to ponder as we wrap up. We started by talking about the romantic ideal of charity driven by handshakes, goodwill, and just this unfiltered desire to help.
Right.
But as these massive international legal frameworks, the GDPR, the AI Act, foreign influence registries, as they continue to expand their extraterritorial reach and their sheer complexity, who gets left behind? Are we approaching a future where only massive corporate-scale entities can actually afford the legal overhead required to do international charity work?
It's a sobering thought. It forces us to ask if the cost of compliance is inadvertently destroying that grassroots spirit.
Exactly. Will the crushing weight of having to navigate data spiderwebs and foreign agent definitions effectively regulate small, community-driven humanitarian efforts completely out of global existence? Is something anyone who cares about making a tangible difference in the world really needs to think about. Thank you for joining us for this discussion. Keep your curiosity sharp, keep asking the hard questions, and we will catch you next time.